event, Breathe Again, Healthy Air is Healthcare. My name is Hannah Schultz, and I am the program coordinator at Georgia Interfaith Power and Light.
And I'm Jen Chandler. I'm the Director of Operations at Elders Climate Action. And I want to welcome you and say a special thank you to all of our additional partners who have made this event possible. Mothers and Others for Clean Air, North Carolina Interfaith Power and Light, Alabama Interfaith Power and Light, and the People's Justice Council and United Methodist Women.
And of course, a big thanks to all of you for showing up today to learn more about the health impacts of air pollution and what's at stake for our communities. You'll notice that you have the option to turn your video on, so we encourage you to do so if you feel comfortable, but please turn your microphone off for now. We encourage you to ask questions in the chat, and we'll have time to build community and get to know each other in just a few minutes.
Together, we'll have the power to take action, and we are so glad that you're here today to learn how to be local leaders in your communities. During today's event, you will hear from experts about the issues surrounding air pollution, the climate crisis, and health, and meet others who are working within this issue in your state. And you're going to learn how to take legislative action. It's our hope that you will leave today feeling equipped and empowered to share this information with others and lead this training in your community.
We hope that you will also be able to join us again tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for part 2 of this training, where together we will call our legislators and ask them to take bold climate action. The time to act is now. As the climate crisis continues to threaten our communities and perpetuate injustices across our country, it is imperative that we come together for collective action. Your voice matters, and you have the power to make a difference.
We're going to start our training today with a little bit of building community and getting to know one another. So I'm going to turn it over now to Liz, and she's going to explain our first breakout session.
Hello, good morning, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Chanhe, or Liz Lee, and I'm on staff with United Methodist Women as the Executive for Economic and Environmental Justice. It is great to see so many familiar faces and new faces here on this training event, and privileged to partner with all the co-host organizations. As was noted by Jen and Hannah, our goal during this training is to build relationships and connections with others, right? In other organizations and with one another who engage in clean air, environmental, and climate justice work. We're going to have several breakout groups over the next 2 sessions, but this first breakout group, as you see on the slide, will be randomly divided so you can meet others across the US. We'll spend about 12 minutes in our groups where you will have about 1 to 2 minutes to share. And our prompt is this: briefly talk about an experience you have had with air pollution, either an everyday experience or a one-time experience. It could be about where you live, if you were near a wildfire, your kid's school, near a highway, a factory that had a problem and belched a lot of pollution. In my context, I could talk about the heavy traffic in our neighborhood and my child taking a school bus every single day. And the impact that it has on her lungs and our community. So we'll be going into breakout groups, and please make sure there's time for everyone to share. So keep your initial comments to 1 to 2 minutes as you introduce yourself, and be engaged in active listening. So thanks all. We'll see you on the other side, and we'll come back in about 12 minutes. Welcome back, friends. We'll have more opportunities and breakouts, but I hope you're able to hold with you as we continue on in this, the stories that you've heard, the impact that air pollution is having in fellow participants, and that'll be the reality in the trainings that you organize as well, right? Yeah. We are all impacted in some way. So now I'm going to hand it over to Hannah, who will introduce the next portion of our time together and our speaker.
I'm so happy to be introducing Dr. Ann Mallinger Birdsong. She graduated from the College of William and Mary and Eastern Virginia Medical School. She completed a pediatrics residency at Hershey Medical Center of the Pennsylvania State University, following which she became board certified in pediatrics and a fellow in the American Academy of Pediatrics. She then completed a master's of public health and epidemiology at Johns Hopkins University. She has worked as a medical epidemiologist at the Philadelphia Department of Public Health, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Georgia Division and Department of Public Health, the American Lung Association of Georgia, and Mothers and Others for Clean Air. She's worked in areas as diverse as communicable diseases, vaccine preventable diseases, radiation environmental health, environmental public health, asthma, a county STD clinic, a county tuberculosis clinic, and a Native American Indian Health Service clinic. She's a founding member of Georgia Clinicians for Climate Action, vice chair of the Georgia AAP Committee on Environmental Health, and a member of the Georgia AAP Legislative Committee. Dr. Ann, welcome. It is so good to have you with us.
Hello, I'm Ann Mallinger Birdsong, and this presentation is a collaborative presentation for information and action. Next slide. So basically the main takeaway is that air pollution is bad for your health as smoking cigarettes, but we as individuals, we can't quit breathing air pollution the way a person could quit smoking. It takes collective action to clean up the air. So that's why we're here today, to learn more about what we can do. Next slide. We'll start off by going over different kinds of air pollution and why they're bad for our health. Nitrogen oxides come from burning anything because air is 78% nitrogen. So when we burn things, what we burn not only combines with oxygen, it also combines with nitrogen and makes nitrogen oxides. Nitrogen oxides cause 1.3% of all deaths in the US each year. They affect our hearts and lungs and cause asthma and asthma attacks. Particle pollution is the black and white photo on the bottom left that just shows some different kinds of particles. It comes from burning fuel, from factories, from refineries, and also from natural sources such as dust or wildfires. Particle pollution from fossil fuels causes 13.6%, or more than 1 in 8 of all deaths in the US each year. Particle pollution can get into our bloodstream straight from our lungs, and it affects every organ in our whole body. Your lungs, your heart, your brain, your kidneys, and much more. It's linked to heart disease, strokes, dementia, cancer, high blood pressure, diabetes, and in children, it damages lung growth. It causes mental health problems for everybody and slows our brains down so we don't think as well. It causes kids to not learn as well in school and much, much more. Volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, come from fossil and biomass fuels, from drilling, from pipelines, from leaks, from refineries, from factories, and from burning it. They can be carcinogenic or cause headaches or other health problems. It depends on which particular chemical you're breathing. When we burn fuel, they can combine with nitrogen oxides in the air and make ozone in the summer. So both nitrogen oxides and VOCs are substrates for ozone. And then ozone is on the bottom right, and this is just a diagram that shows how it forms, because ozone forms new every day. It takes sunlight, it takes heat, it takes oxygen, and it takes chemicals, which is where the VOCs or nitrogen oxides come in. So the chemicals come from cars and trucks and other vehicles. It comes from factories and power plants and industrial facilities. The ozone damages us from our nose down our airways and into our lungs, and it can trigger heart problems or affect your brain. There's a recent study that it causes cognitive loss in older people. Next slide. So next we'll talk about children's health. Again, it affects every organ in our body. So it affects us before we're born, when the mother is exposed to air pollution while she's pregnant. It's also especially bad for children because children breathe more than adults and children's organs are all still growing. It affects pregnancy outcomes, causing lower birth weight and premature birth. People who are exposed before birth are affected when they're toddlers and preschoolers. You can measure differences in their cognitive test scores. And it damages children's lungs all the way through the teenage years. So you think teenagers grow a lot tall and their lungs grow to match the growth of their rib cage too. So there's a lot of lung growth happening when they're teenagers. And teens that grow up in polluted areas end up with smaller lungs. That sets us all up for a lifetime of health problems. Air pollution can cause asthma. It definitely triggers asthma attacks in children who have asthma. It affects children's ability to learn and do well in school. It affects their aerobic capacity while they're exercising at school, and it has been linked to behavioral problems in school. It also causes mental stress and mental health care issues in children. Next slide. Then we'll talk about adults. And again, remember, it goes to every organ in our body. When we breathe it, it gets in our blood and goes everywhere. It's especially bad for our hearts, lungs, brains, and kidneys and arteries, causing heart attacks, strokes, dementia, lung cancer, and other kinds of cancer, and it's linked to many other problems. It also makes us more likely to get infections like flu or influenza and COVID. There's quite a few studies showing that both more people got sick with COVID and they had worse cases of COVID if they lived in a polluted area. And it really is like we're smoking cigarettes, but we didn't put a cigarette in our mouth. We're just breathing the air that's around us, and that's getting in our lungs. Next slide. This is about who lives near air pollution. Because of our country's past decisions in environmental racism, we built power plants, factories, refineries, and highways in or near communities of colors. Many communities right now are overburdened because they have multiple sources of pollution, either a lot of highways plus a couple factories or things like that. And it was built this way. That was the design. And even though redlining was stopped more than 50 years ago, we still see the effects today with more heat, fewer trees, more roads and buildings, and more pollution in the areas that were considered the red area on the red map. These are photos are just some that Reverend Malcolm took of this is a biomass plant in the background of the one photo on the left, and there's a community right next to it, and they're breathing all the pollution that it makes. And it was recently built in the last 10 or 15 years, but the community has been there forever, and they just decided it was a good place to build it. Next slide. So this graph tells the story of environmental racism. I don't have the cursor control, but you can see the two solid lines on the top are exposure. Those are the exposure levels for Black and Latinx people, and whereas their consumption lines are the dashed lines on the bottom. So they have the most exposure, but the least consumption. And white people have the most consumption and the least exposure. So it's just a story that you can see in a graph. Next slide. This is also another study about heat and redlining, and heat builds up when there's more highways or buildings or not enough trees or green space. And so this study, they went and measured 100+ cities all around the country. And these are the top 20 cities with the biggest difference between neighborhoods that were called redlined and green or white neighborhoods. And you can see the top 3 are Portland, Denver, and Minneapolis, but there's quite a few in the South and Southeast too. And so this is what we're seeing now, even though redlining was outlawed 50 years ago or more, the effects are persisting because we still have all the built buildings and highways that we built back when redlining was in place. And I just think about, Portland with the biggest difference. When they measured 115 degrees last summer, it was hotter in some neighborhoods because where they measure is not necessarily the hottest neighborhood. Next slide. This is another graph that tells a picture. It's about climate change, and this is for the whole world. So the richest 10%, the dark green bar at the bottom, we make 50% of the carbon dioxide emissions in the world. And then half the world, the dark green box at the bottom, that's half the population. They make only 10%, but they're the ones being exposed to all the risk with floods and bad storms and heat waves and wildfires. Next slide. But the good news is, if we clean up air pollution, our health improves within weeks. We have less phlegm, less cough, less shortness of breath. There's fewer school absences. People don't go to the doctor's office as much. There's not as many people needing to go in the hospital, and fewer people die. We've seen this in the United States when coal plants close in California. Within a short while, there's fewer premature births. And here in Atlanta, where I live, during the Olympics, just that 2-week period, there were fewer children who went to the ER or were in the hospital with asthma attacks, just because the ozone went down during the Olympics. Next slide. So what can we do about air pollution and environmental and climate justice? We have to work together, and together we can fix it, just like we did with getting the Clean Air Act passed. If we act together now, we can get more legislation and more policies to get the air cleaner. Next slide. So this is just areas that need work, and schools can have electric school buses. We can build our schools not right next to highways. Cities and counties can have zoning that can affect gas hookups. They can affect charging equity for electric vehicles. States have policies they can implement, and then at the federal level, policy can push states to act. We can have funding for clean energy and clean transportation, and we can have regulations that make standards for power plants and vehicles so that they're not making as much pollution. And even for energy production, the EMCs and the power companies can build more solar, more wind, and they can work on energy justice so that it's not all lopsided favoring the rich people. Next slide. And I want to end with some false solutions which are being talked about now, but nuclear power makes lots of dirty fuel rods that we still haven't figured out what to do with. And in addition, a lot of uranium mines are in indigenous communities and create a lot of radiation hazard there. And also, building a new nuclear power plant takes 20 or 30 years. We just don't have that long in terms of climate change or the way people are dying now. Hydrogen fuel cells, right now, a lot of fossil fuels are used to make it. And if we had clean energy, they would be a good way to go, but using fossil fuels to make it just makes as much air pollution and carbon as if we're burning it straight. Biomass is really bad. It makes lots of toxic air pollution. It makes more carbon dioxide than coal, but it was somehow considered renewable. So a lot of countries are using it, and there's a big commercial push for it, but it's just bad accounting. It's basically smoke and mirrors. And again, biomass plants, either the facility that makes the wood pellets or the place where it's burning, are often located in communities of colors. And then carbon capture and storage, right now it doesn't work. There's a few experimental projects and they end up using so much fuel to capture it that they make more CO2 than they capture. It also only addresses carbon and doesn't address all the air pollution coming from burning fossil fuels or biomass. So it's not a good, if it would work, it might be okay for climate, but it's not working really well, and it doesn't address the other kinds of air pollution. So, and then the next slide. So that's basically, that was just a short presentation, but I want to point out many of the references for this talk and other scientific articles are at the Mothers and Others for Clean Air website in the Research Hub. We also have a section called Latest Headlines where we put up new recent research that's just come out. And the NRDC has information for many states about job creation. If we invest in clean energy and transportation, how many new jobs we'll get in each state. And we'll send you a resource packet called Breathe Again Resources that has links to all these, so you don't have to worry about searching for it right now. And that's it.
Well, thank you, Dr. Ann. That you said that's it, as if you have so many resources, so much information. You've been my go-to expert in this area since I've begun partnering with Mothers and Others for Clean Air. And we are grateful to have you be a part of this Training the Trainers section sessions, which is really the kickoff for an entire year of work that hopefully will be about movement building at the local, state, regional, and national levels. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we have our collective shared action later today in preparation for tomorrow's big day of action. So we are about ready to go into our breakout session 2. Great comments in the chat. Keep those coming. And yes, you will all receive a packet with the information, the recording, the slides, and other resources. And we have people from all over the country that registered for this event today. And I'm just so incredibly impressed. A Training the Trainers session like this means that you are committed to taking this content and really becoming champions on the information and issues in your area. So you can see we've divided the hundreds of you that have registered into different regions of the state. So we have 8 breakouts that we're going to be opening up for you, and you will elect to choose to go in. We've made the decision to put your states in these different regions. If you feel like you'd like to go to a different breakout, that's up to you. But we have Appalachia, the Midwest, the Northeast, the Southeast, the West, and Southwest. And then 3 state-specific breakouts, California, Georgia, and Texas, because of the numbers of registrants that we had for those 3 specific states. And so while you're in your breakout, we'd love for you to discuss particulars with each other about what's going on in your state and region, how the presentation relates to state level policies and actions. And then if you're in a breakout where you know, it's a more generalized discussion talking about wildfire pollution, certain types of states, pros and antis may have resources to share. So let's go into the breakout rooms. We're going to have about 20 minutes to be in here. We do, as always, want to make sure that everyone has a chance to share. So that active listening that Liz introduced in the beginning is a great practice. And if you have any questions, we have folks that will be staying back in the main room to get you to where you need to go. So let's go ahead and open up these breakout rooms. And you will have a facilitator in each of the room.
If there's a state that you do not see listed, choose whatever breakout room you feel is most appropriate for you. So for example, if you're in Wisconsin, you might want to join probably the Midwest breakout room.
Great, Jen.
I'm
Thank you
going to go ahead and open the rooms now. And if you do not see something pop up to select, hover over the bottom of your window and you should see a box called breakout rooms, and then you should be able to choose which room you would like to go in. So you can,
and if you're having any trouble, I'll be here to help out.
All right. As happens sometimes, if you were like me, you were in mid-sentence and got cut off, but I hope you all had a rich experience of getting to know one another. And what I was saying in my room, at least, was that this is the kickoff event of a national gathering where we're going to come together and be able to get to know each other better at the regional and state levels. And at least in my breakout room in the Southeast, we had a really nice diversity of folks that are new to this issue and folks that are working on this issue in their professional capacities. So I'm really excited about that. And I hope you had a similar experience. We are going to move into learning what our legislative ask is. We're already at the hour from when we started. We hope you can stay on until 1:30. Hannah, at least on my screen, the slide is a little wonky. I don't know if that's the case for anyone else. Ariana says, yes, I see her nodding her head. We're waiting, what does UMW stand for? I will be happy to answer that question, although maybe Liz wants to answer it real quick. Liz, are you there?
Sure, United Methodist Woman.
Yeah, and we have lots in the house today. It's wonderful from all over the country. So we have a short video to share, and we might have technical difficulties. And if that's the case, we'll see if we can do that.
But every school day that your kids breathe polluted air is as bad for them as smoking cigarettes. In fact, air pollution affects our entire body, all the organs, and the brain. And kids' growing bodies and lungs are more vulnerable because they breathe more than adults. Let's talk numbers. Over 6 million kids attend school within a quarter mile of a major roadway. 26 million kids travel on our nation's 480,000 buses back and forth to school each day. 95% of these buses emit diesel exhaust. Kids riding these buses are exposed to up to 4 times more air pollutants than the general population. Air pollution stunts lung growth, affects learning and behavior, increases risk of infections, and causes asthma, one of the leading reasons kids miss school. But it doesn't have to be this way. The solutions are here. Switching to clean, renewable energy and electric vehicles means kids and their caretakers can breathe easier. Healthy air improves kids' physical and mental health and their ability to learn. For caretakers, that means worrying less about your child's health, school performance, and the rising costs of healthcare. Your voice matters. Tell your leaders, healthy air is healthcare.
Thank you, Hannah. That video worked well. And that tagline, or that very clear messaging of healthy air is healthcare, is so profound, and something that as our voices become unified and we understand the local to the regional to the national issues, we can come together as a movement to really spread that understanding of healthcare. Healthy air is healthcare. And just briefly, I'm going to talk, as we hand it over to Liz, about the action that we're going to be taking tomorrow. How we message around this, that healthy air is healthcare, is really a message based in love. I often talk about the work that we do around justice and equity, diversity, inclusion, for climate justice, for creation care, is that it really is a What I Love campaign for the love of this world. So next slide, just briefly. In North Carolina and across the Southeast, and now as it expands, our work expands nationally, we've been using the language of advocating with compassion. And so when I say that as a kind of pedagogy for our work, the etymology of compassion is in Latin means co-suffering. So I heard in our breakout group that, some folks have issues that are more pressing than perhaps air pollution in the geographical location that they live in. But the concept of caring for our neighbors, caring for our brothers and sisters on the local and global scale is really to have compassion and to truly co-suffer from what they're experiencing. So more involved than simple empathy, compassion commonly gives rise to an active desire to alleviate another's suffering. And those of us that are faith-based in the way that we do this work, we understand that we all carry the same message, and that is love. And as I work across non-faith-based spaces as well, love is the way forward, compassion and forgiveness, and how we interact with our elected officials and lead with love can make all the change in the world. So next slide. We have a lot of messaging and a lot of opportunities for social media toolkits over the course of the next year. And our action tomorrow will just be the first of many that we will take together for the love of each other, for the love of all species, and for the love of creation, for the love of the people and places that we live. So mobilizing with love, motivated by love. I'm going to hand it over to Liz to talk about the action. Next slide.
Thank you so much, Susanna. The power of story is so important. And Reverend Susanna, thank you for speaking about compassionate advocacy, right? And how we can ground that in our work. Friends, you have already shared in breakout groups about how air pollution is directly impacting your communities, what's happening at the state level, and what needs to happen in your local, state, regional area. You've heard from Dr. Ann about what, if we want to breathe clean air, and ensure that communities most impacted by toxic air pollution, if we want to address that, we must drastically reduce fossil fuel, right, and other pollutants. So we are at a pivotal time in our country to not go beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius, right? And we in the United States must make bold action. So we're only 4% of the world's population, 25% of cumulative historic emissions of greenhouse gases, and we're being impacted already. So when you do your own trainings and events, your advocacy might be at the local, state, or national level. So we recognize it's different. Given that we are together at this national gathering, and given the particular moment that we are in, we will be having a national ask. And this is quite important because we also know that air doesn't stay within one's own geographical county boundary or state boundary, right? So it needs to be addressed at the federal level. And I'm from New York. A number of you in your own conversations and breakout groups and ours as well was speaking about that we may have ambitious climate legislation noted at the state level, but there is no funding. Right. And so this is what our focus is going to be. And here is the ask, right? Climate can't wait. It's time for President Biden and Congress to address the public health and environmental impacts caused by poor air quality and the climate crisis. So what do we want? We want them to pass clean air and climate legislation and funding, including $550 billion in investments that will cut dangerous pollution, prioritize clean energy investments, and advance environmental justice. Some may say, well, there was an infrastructure package, right? That was passed, and that's true, but that only addressed a small portion. And in fact, there was some funding for like electric school buses, and public transit, but most of the funds were actually for, in terms of infrastructure, around transportation, around highways as well. And so we want funds to go to really move us towards drastically reducing air pollution, addressing the climate crisis, and we want the funds to be directed towards communities that are most impacted, right? Black, Indigenous, Latino, Asian American, low wealth communities that have been disproportionately harmed, as well as just transitions for workers who are transitioning from a fossil fuel economy to a just energy, renewable energy economy as well. So we were actually going to go into some of the processes of the actual action tomorrow, where we'll be signing a petition, writing to President Biden, and then writing and calling our legislators, our congressional legislators, our 2 senators, and our House of Representatives, and then doing some social media. And we will type in the chat box if you wanted to act today, right? Even today, you can act on that. Next slide, I just wanted to talk about some of the additional benefits of what it can look like if with that 550, right? So it means that it would drastically reduce emissions. It's 40,000 electric school buses, 12,500 tax credit for electric vehicles, creates over 150,000 family-sustaining jobs. It makes it cheaper for churches, nonprofit schools to install wind and solar, and supports more than 60,000 farmers to switch to renewable energy, and also replaces 2 million lead service lines that will provide clean water. So this is what $500 billion can do. We are going to go into a breakout session in a little while, but you heard about the story And we're going to be sharing our own stories in a bit. But to give you an example, we're going to be hearing from a powerful preacher, storyteller, and prophet around environmental and climate justice, Reverend Malcolm. So excited that he's going to be with us to just talk about, well, how do we frame this, right? How do we engage in compassionate advocacy? So Rev, it's all you.
All right. Hey, everybody. Please forgive me. Let me tell you all that I am actually in the woods in a cabin at a retreat right now where we are planning some things for the state of Alabama together to uplift Alabama and to also fight against some of these issues that we're talking about today, such as air pollution. Let me go back and look at the picture that Doc gave us and about it. You don't have to put up. Let me talk about this community, and I want to show by example what storytelling looks like. And I didn't want to do PowerPoints or anything because I really want you to just take a listen and look at me for a minute and really recognize these people here in Gloucester, Mississippi, who are fighting against this air pollution from this biomass plant. So it happened that one day I was accompanying Dogwood Alliance to the state of Mississippi and to this community in Gloucester, Mississippi. And while going, Nico Brown, who is a dear sister and ally of mine, took me to this community called Blackman Hole. And when I approached this community, even before approaching it, you could smell the air and feel the thickness in the air. And when I got ready to approach this community, I didn't see the mobile homes at first, y'all. The first thing that I saw was this biomass plant and then spewing smoke out of it or emissions out of it from the manufacturing of these wood pellets. And then I recognized the mobile homes. And when I recognized the mobile homes, I saw that this plant literally sits on top of these mobile homes. And that same thickness of air that I smelled and tasted in my mouth was the same thickness, was the same air that they were smelling 24/7. They never could leave it. For some, they could leave it temporarily to go to work and then come home and still smell and have to live with the same pollution. And beloved, I need to tell you that it is our job to call those who make decisions in to care for those who they don't see. This is a community that has been abandoned, a community that has not been thought of and has been tossed aside. It is for us, people of faith, people of conscience, to come together and to lean on our legislators to let them know. I'm reminded of a story that I've read in scripture about an old lady who the Bible calls an elderly lady, who goes and before a judge, and each time she goes before this judge, the judge tells her no. The judge denies her and she walks away, but each day she comes back, and eventually when she comes back, the judge sees that she's not going to give up, that she's going to be persistent in her ask, and the judge starts reasoning within himself, and the Bible says that the judge says, if I don't do what she tells me to do, she ain't going nowhere, and in fact, it's going to look like a black eye for me. And in essence, it'll be an embarrassment for me if I don't help this woman. And I need to tell some folks that's getting ready to make some calls and go before your legislators. Oftentimes we get denied, and oftentimes it doesn't feel like it's going to work out on our behalf. It doesn't feel like it's going to manifest for us. But I need to tell you that you just got to keep on coming. You've got to keep on talking. So when we make a phone call tomorrow, or when we send an email out tomorrow, or when we send that tweet out tomorrow, we've got to keep doing it, and we've got to keep doing it until we have ourselves a better tomorrow, until those who are in Blackman Hole no longer have to suffer under that pollution, until those who are throughout this country and out throughout these communities no longer have to endure the egregious assault from industrial pollution that happens to them. And for us, we know that you can plant pollution, but you can't contain it. So the same air that they breathe is the same air that we breathe. I tasted that air that particular day, but I need to tell you all that it was a familiar taste because I tasted that same air as I was growing up. And I'll be honest with you and tell you once again that I still taste that air as I live in my community now. And so it affects us all, and we need to do something about it. So tell your story. I told that story, Blackman Hole. I told you my story. Now it's time for you to tell your story, and we look forward to hearing the stories that you tell. Thank you. Thank you for your time. And today, as always, I offer to you love, peace, and light.
Thank you, my brother, Reverend Malcolm. Oh, I needed that today. I feel so connected to all of you that we are getting to know through this movement building. As Rev said, the ability to charge forward and to recognize when we think about compassion, think about that co-suffering, that we know that taste, we feel that in our own hearts and souls and minds as we do this work. So we are going to move in again to breakout rooms. We're really trying to build community as we need to moving forward, and get ready for tomorrow. So this is going to go fast. We're already at almost the 1:15 mark. So we're just going to be in here for about 8 to 10 minutes. But we want to go into groups of about 4 people, just back like we did in the opening session, and be able to review the ask, help people think about our personal story, how air pollution relates to us, brainstorm what our personal story is, how we're going to tie that into what's happening in our states. So let's go into our breakout rooms. These are going to be random. And we will come back and then have a closing and get ready for tomorrow.
Welcome back, everyone. We know you're slowly coming back and being pulled in. Thank you. I hope you had some good opportunity to hear and also speak about your own personal story and narrative. I'm going to drop in the chat box are the action that you can take that we'll be doing tomorrow. And Rev, we were in conversation and Reverend Malcolm said, call every day, so they hear your voice, and we're doing more of the specifics tomorrow. But if you want to do it even today, at the end of this call, you're welcome to do so. I'm going to hand it over to our partner in work, Jerry, to lead us in a time of Q&A.
Welcome back, everybody. You've heard a lot of information, shared a lot today. And we're ready to move forward. I'm Jerry Friedman. I'm with the People's Justice Council, and I live in Michigan. I hope you've got more information about air pollution and health. And as Liz said, we have some time for questions and answers. I'm looking in the chat, so please I cannot see you all. So if you raise your hand, I don't think I'll see it. If you have a question, please put it in the chat and we will address it, or we will try to. So we do have a question. I think perhaps Dr. Ann, that how does air pollution affect soil and water?
That's actually a big thing. Sulfur dioxide, that's one of the kinds of air pollution, causes acid rain hundreds of miles away from the power plants, and that has been a big problem. It's part of the reason we have the Clean Air Act. And then there's also lead and mercury and arsenic are in the smokestacks from the power plants, and they get out in the air, wash into the streams and the rivers and lakes. So in Georgia, where I live, almost 3/4 of our lakes or rivers have fish advisories that you shouldn't eat more than 1 fish a week or 1 fish a month, depending on which river or lake it is, because of the mercury that came from the power plants. And right now, EPA is about to redo their mercury rule for power plants. So you can be on the lookout if you follow us on Twitter or just listen out, can get all of our group to forward links. The EPA is redoing the mercury and air toxics rule for power plants, and we can all speak up or write comments if we're not comfortable with public speaking, and that will really affect what EPA does to keep us healthier.
Great, thank you. Another question, and I think I'll turn this to Reverend Susanna. Are there resources for getting information to tell a compassionate story about others when we ourselves don't have experience with air pollution, when somebody is fortunate to live in a place that does not have direct exposure to air pollution? Reverend Susanna, are you able to pick up some resources?
Yes, absolutely. And I find that actually is my story as of today from where I live in the Research Triangle of North Carolina, Raleigh-Durham area. What I've been learning is about Charlotte, North Carolina, which is still in my state. We still have the same representatives in Congress. And so listening and learning from the people that are directly impacted. Charlotte is one of the most polluted areas. And I didn't realize that the Appalachian Mountains that are right there kind of collect all of the air and make it sit above a city like Charlotte because it doesn't have any place to go. And so as we learn about each other, I can be an ally and an advocate for my friends and colleagues that live in Charlotte. And so I think that that's part of what we're trying to do with this movement building is really get to know each other. I've already learned so much from each of you today, and I feel like I could be an advocate to help and name, my friend who's a United Methodist woman who's now on an inhaler and, is directly impacted. So I think that's some of the sessions that we can have moving forward as we practice together and learn together. And then of course, data points, although it is the storytelling we know, and we've heard from members of Congress that they're handed fact sheets all the time. And, that's important, but they will remember the stories. So let's learn each other's stories as Reverend Malcolm so beautifully inspired us to do. Great question.
Thank you so much, Reverend Susanna. We have had a lot of information and we're running short on time. We'll have some more time tomorrow for questions and answers. And if there are still outlying questions, we'll try and continue the dialogue and keep you informed and answer more questions. But right now I'm going to turn it over to Ariana to close us out for our day.
Yeah, thank you first off for everyone who came. We do want to give a huge reminder that you can join us tomorrow, February 18th from the same time, 12 to 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And tomorrow we're all going to take collective legislative action together. So it's really important that you come and we're going to have a great time. So please try to make it. I also wanted to give huge thank yous to all of our organizations that helped out today. Elders Climate Action, United Methodist Women, People's Justice Council, Georgia Interfaith Power and Light, Mothers and Others for Clean Air, Alabama Interfaith Power and Light, and North Carolina Interfaith Power and Light. And an even bigger thank you to USCAN, the United States Climate Action Network, for helping provide the funding to this. And lastly, thank you to all of you for coming. And I want to close out today with a poem from, his name is Christian Kale. He's a 5th grader in Wisconsin, and he wrote a poem that's called Let's Clear the Air. And it says, I would love to live in a world where everyone aspires to breathe the cleanest and freshest of air. Air so pure, it's beyond compare. I want the whole world to agree and to be aware that it takes action from us all to lessen pollution so it's fair. If we all cooperate, it would show we care. To have clear, clean air for future generations to share. We'd be much happier and healthier, I swear, if we could all work together to get there. And I think that's the sentiment of why we're all here today. We want to make a better, cleaner, safer future for everyone. And today and tomorrow, we're going to take the action to do it. So thank you all so much.